Hi, this is Paul. Dune is obviously the big movie out right now. Damian Walter, who's been on the channel, has done a couple of videos about it. I really liked his Dune 2 Star Wars killer video. He's talked about Frank Herbert. He's he's gone into this quite a bit, and Damian's a guy who knows enough about enough things to really go into something like this. And well, let's start with this where he started his latest video.
Ritual of hunting, and through that mythos,
Let's start at the beginning.
I want you to tell me if you have ever had this experience. You are in a darkened cinema auditorium, and the fanfare plays. Dun da 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 da. And I know that the 20th Century Fox fanfare belongs to the studio, not to the Star Wars franchise. But I think on some subliminal level, when I try and watch the Disney Star Wars movies, it is the lack of the fanfare that just indicates to me that there's something slightly wrong with this experience. But that's not the whole experience I want you to tell me about. But I do want you to tell me, leave me a comment, send me a message on any of the platforms where you can find me. If you've had this experience, you listen to the fanfare, you follow the entire hero's journey, be it of a young man from a desert world, or indeed another young man from a desert world, or whoever the central protagonist of this story is. And for 2 hours, you follow them to the peak of their progression on that spiritual journey described for us by Joseph Campbell. And you feel filled with transcendent emotion, the true experience of cinema. And I'm sure you've had that experience, and that's not the experience that I want you to tell me about. If you've experienced the experience, is then you get up from your seat, you ditch the empty popcorn into the bin, hopefully, if you're a responsible cinema goer, and you push through the double fire escape doors and you enter a shopping center, a shopping mall for most of us. One of those.
I love how he opened that. He sort of builds up to it. Now, I did a conversation with someone who does another guy who has a channel that does movie things, and it's in the membership section. He wanted it in the membership section, not out on the full section. And I talked about how I watch many channels do it, and this right at this point, Damien was sort of playing this loop of Dune images. And once you see it go through once, you see it go through again, you realize, okay, that there's something about these movie images that are mesmerizing. They sort of take you. And I like how he opened this because, oh, there's the fanfare, da 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 da, the fanfare, and then you're in the movie and you're having this experience, and you're just like you're in, and then the movie's over, and you get up, and you walk out of the theater. And I was listening to Friday Morning Nameless, listening to Alan and Neil. Great. Chad says the Friday morning fragments with Alan and Neil, episode 6. Really a lot of good stuff in it. Oh, and Chad also had the other flotillas, which actually had my sister's channel in there. The other flotillas, I also thought, Digital Gnosis, that's sort of a parallel flotilla, Chad, so if you want to track them. Anyway, so I'm watching this, and, well, because Dune came out, because I read Dune when I was in high school, college, I think high school or college, I don't remember, I think probably high school, and then I read a number of the sequels of Dune. And of course, the first book was the best, and then the sequels got successively less interesting. And I want to talk about that. I want to talk about that, especially with respect to. So so Damien contrasts Dune with Star Wars, and that's a really apt contrast given the Jungian ideas deep beneath them, sort of that came up through the surface, and Dune 2 is the Star Wars killer. Damien goes into that, and then I found this other video. Algo started serving me up this channel, Jess of the Shire, that I had never heard anything about, and of course, because I love Tolkien and Lord of the Rings, and the video that I got served up was Why Do We Love Dune? I watched a little bit of that, and then Tolkien's problems with Dune.
This video has been...
And of course, it's got paid promotions in there, and she's a lovely young woman, and she's talking about Tolkien and a lot of the backstory. It's an excellent video. It's only 28 minutes. I very much recommend it. And she also went into sort of the Frank Herbert Tolkien thing. So Mr. Lanier, who was behind the Chilton automotive manuals that I used to use to fix the cheap cars that I'd buy for myself, sent Tolkien a copy of Dune. And, well, he responded, I received your book Dune just before I went abroad for a short while, hence the delay in acknowledging it. I don't think I shall ever have time to read it until I get my next holiday. I'm very much pressed, and I am deep in my own world from which it is difficult to pull out. I've had to write many weeks of work on the troubles caused by ace book piracy of The Lord of the Rings, and therefore behind with one of my contracts. There's one thing about the books which puzzles me, though. Your label would suggest it was meant to be sent to my post. It was eventually delivered, blah, 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 blah. Anyway, Tolkien eventually does get the book, and he reads it, and his answer to that is 1966. In fact, I dislike Dune with some intensity, and in that unfortunate case, it is much the best and fairer of another offer to keep silent and refuse to comment. Why would you like, so eventually two people sent him the book, so would you like me to return the book to you or just pass it on to somebody else? It's no surprise, of course, that Tolkien was not a Dune fan. Tolkien seemed to be, in many ways, the quintessential curmudgeon with respect to a lot of things, getting annoyed with Lewis, and I'm sure there are many reasons that he hated Dune. Now, what she does in this video, I think, is really quite excellent, because she sort of walks through the fact that Herbert was not a religious believer, and of course Tolkien was. Tolkien sets up his fantasy for a eucatastrophe, so you have this grand conclusion at the end of it, whereas Dune is, well, maybe if you're cheering for Paul Atreides or Muad'Dib, that he is going to finally arise and sort of fulfill the hero's journey in the first book, which he does. It's really interesting to sort of play these two books against each other. So a few little clips. I subbed to her channel. I loved it.
Tolkien's Middle-earth sprung up from the basis of language. Tolkien was first and foremost a philologist, and he created Middle-earth as a way to lend shape and history to the languages that he was inventing. Herbert, however, was a journalist by trade. He knew a little bit about everything. Politics, religion, philosophy, psychology, medicine, and most importantly, ecology. That isn't to say just environmental ecology, though. Herbert said, I think there are such things as psychological ecology, religious ecology, economic ecology, etc., and none of them can exist in a vacuum. They're all interrelated.
And I think this is part of what gives Dune, part of what I like about Dune. I really enjoyed Dune when I first read it. And a number of years ago, when I was driving my kids to school, I would often play audiobooks that I would think that they would enjoy. And they had never heard of Dune. Of course, they were neck deep in Star Wars, but I played Dune for my kids on the way to school for a season, and they really enjoyed it. I didn't get past the first book, but they remember it. And now, of course, some decent movie adaptations have now arrived. But this sense of Dune where you do have the religious and the ecological and the economic and they're all sort of interlaced in the story. And, well, she'll continue here.
Thus, the world of Dune emerges from this ecology, and Herbert's belief that ecology is all about understanding and accepting consequences. And when you look at it, Dune is all about these consequences. Technology becomes too advanced? Well, that means that it begins to overwhelm humanity. The logical response to that is that humanity is going to fight back. They're going to have a holy war and destroy all thinking technology. The consequence of that is the world that we see in Dune, one that has cycled back, pushed back through all of this technology to go back to a feudal, pseudo-medieval state. Herbert's fervent pursuit of
And that's right. And you find Herbert using all of these things and wrapping this together for this world. And again, this is another example of, and I think Damien Walker, if you go back and you look at the Rebel Wisdom conversation between Jonathan Peugeot and Damien Walker, this space in which fantasy and science fiction sort of come together. We only know ourselves by knowing our past, and we tend to project that into the future, and I think Dune does that quite well. She also nicely goes into Tolkien's idea of recovery.
everyday lives blind us to the wondrous things around us. Things that used to seem magical or thrilling lose their shine when we see them every day, day in and day out. They once attracted us by their glitter or their color or their shape, and we laid hands on them, and then locked them in our hoard, acquired them, and then acquiring, ceased to look at them. Good fairy stories have the capacity to take things that have become dull and pedestrian and to reset them, to recover them. The strangeness of the fairy realm, the glamour of the unreal takes things like trees and friendship and honor and sunshine and shakes the dust off of them. It recovers these ideas in a new setting and allows us to see them for the wondrous, beautiful things that they truly are. He makes love seem like something carved into destiny and time, something spinning and spectacular. He shows us what a gift forgiveness, honor, and redemption are. He takes mundane things like trees and stars and shows us, once again, how truly magical they can be. Recover.
And that's Tolkien, of course. And the magic of the elves, there's a buoyancy to Tolkien. And so reading Herbert again, and I really enjoy Dune. And I plan to, once I get through Dune, I plan to take a look again at some of the sequels, because as with many things that I read when I was younger, I was not up to appreciating them at the time, and now reading Dune again, I hear and see so much more. Herbert seems almost cynical about things. There is very much adrenaline and drama and excitement in the narrative, but it's not. Is Tolkien escapist? Or is Tolkien redemptive? And so this idea of recovery is in there. And Herbert, it's drama. It's a good tale. It's a great read. There's a lot to think about. But the vision of the world and the view of the world is very much darker. And Dune is no Star Trek, where we've sort of transcended all of these base things, and Dune is, and of course it's coming at the same time as Star Trek, but the world of Star Trek versus the world of Dune, very different visions for how the universe is going to look. She picks up on this, so Tolkien being a religious believer, the point she just made about this was escape. And by all means, watch her whole video. And if you like this stuff, yeah, I finished ContraPoints, and then I watched this. And so, wow, what a contrast between this and ContraPoints. And don't get me wrong, the ContraPoints essay on Twilight was tremendous. It was a tremendous piece of work for 3 hours, but as I'm watching ContraPoints, I'm getting a sense of cleverness. I get a much different sense watching this young woman. Anyway. Oh, I lost my mouse. Here we go.
Tolkien despises the grimness with which they predict our history. To judge by some of these tales, humanity will still be as lustful, vengeful, and greedy as ever, and the ideals of their idealists hardly reach farther than the splendid notion of building more towns of the same sort on other planets. It is indeed an age of improved means to deteriorated ends. Tolkien saw his works as an escape from these concerns. It's not surprising then that he so disliked Herbert's works. From the outset, they do present a world that is as lustful, vengeful, and greedy as ever. And yet, when you dig a little bit deeper into Dune's themes, I think it becomes pretty clear that advancement is not necessarily good, and that technology should not progress without regards for morality. I mean,
And of course, given Tolkien's undercurrent about technology, you can understand that. But Tolkien is, of course, buoyed by an eschatology that believes that in the end, good will be done, the woods will be restored, the elves will return, and the kingdom will come. Now, another point here that I thought she was really helpful with was religion.
Bad everything has gone, despite how destroyed the world may be, in the end, goodness will prevail, and the world will be made right. It is the mark of a good fairy story, of the higher or more complete kind, that however fantastic or terrible the adventures, it can give to child or man that hears it, when the turn comes, a catch of breath, a beat and lifting of the heart, near to, or accompanied by tears. In such stories, when the sudden turn comes, we get a piercing glimpse of joy and heart's desire that for a moment passes outside the frame, rends indeed the very web of story, and lets a gleam come through. This gleam is rooted in Tolkien's devout Catholicism. The happy endings of his tales are not just a comfort for the afflicted, they are a promise. Tolkien truly believed that at the end times, God would come and make things right, and this faith, this optimism, fuels Middle-earth and the Lord of the Rings. Indeed, Tolkien's faith is stamped onto every atom of the Lord of the Rings. From its beautiful creation story, which parallels many Catholic teachings, to the Christ analogies that can be made for many of the main characters. Middle-earth and its philosophy and its morality are informed entirely by Tolkien's beliefs. He believed in a firm line between good and evil, and the battle between the two shaped his story from its first moments to its resounding conclusion. Herbert, however, was not religious. His family, especially his aunts, were Catholic, and he studied and included in his works some tenets of Zen Buddhism, but it's likely that in terms of his actual personal belief, he was agnostic for the entirety of his life. This worldview comes through very strongly in his works, where religion can be seen primarily as a tool. This doesn't mean that Herbert disavows the power of religion, though. Rather, the strength of religion and its ability to change people is one of Dune's most major themes. When Paul and Jessica arrive on Arrakis, the Fremen natives immediately begin to wonder if he may be their Lisan al-Gaib, the prophet they have long awaited that was supposed to come from another world. We come to learn, though, that this belief in Lisan al-Gaib was not organic, it didn't come about naturally. It was planted there by the Bene Gesserit witches as a failsafe, so that if any of their sisters and their children were stranded on the planet of Arrakis, the locals would take them in and protect them, thinking that they are their prophet. Religion is also used in the context of ecology, of trying to save the desert planet of Arrakis and return it to being a water-rich paradise. The father of the planetary ecologist Liet Kynes advises his son, "Religion and law among our masses must be one and the same. An act of disobedience must be a sin and require religious penalties. This will have the dual benefit of bringing both greater obedience and greater bravery." Though he did not personally believe any religion, Herbert did believe in religion. He knew it was a central part of human ecology. And he looks at everything with this cynical eye, knowing that the machinations of politics are entirely human-made, knowing that if a messiah figure came along, he would be human, and knowing the dangers that would come with that. Unsurprisingly, there is no catastrophic conclusion for Dune. There is no happy ending. Rather, there is a fugue. The same musical themes that have been at the base of humanity forever, carrying onward. Despite what may sometimes look like destiny, what may sometimes look like fate, human beings have to come to accept that they will always be at war with their universe, not working towards an end goal, but simply working forward. The ecologist Liet Kynes, who was once a huge proponent for progress and advancement, learns, as the planet of Arrakis swallows him whole, that all of these plans and schemes may have been futile. As his planet killed him, it occurred to Kynes that his father and all the other scientists were wrong, that the most persistent principles of the universe were accident and error.
And I thought, again, she did a beautiful job. And it was a nice way of just showing the contrast between the two worlds. It also struck me as I was thinking back, and again, I hope to get through Dune and to get into some of the sequels. I don't know how far I'll get into the sequels. I just found Carl Erie's book about found another Carlos Erie's book that fascinated me, and I'm doing a bit of work on the history of Jerusalem, which is itself a very fascinating thing. These biographies of cities like Shorto's on New York, New Amsterdam, on Old Amsterdam, and so now there's two biographies of Jerusalem I'm dipping into. It struck me as I was thinking back on my young self reading Dune for the first time. And of course, my name is Paul, and the main character's name is Paul, and it's like, oh, thinking for a bit about the hero's journey and about the seduction that the hero's journey can have. And it reminded me again of my conversation with Dr. Jim about James Bond. There is very much in all of us, especially in we men, not we men, but those of us who are men, a desire for heroism. My friend Rod talks about just this part of the desire to. It's tremendously attractive in women to have a need to be rescued, saved, needed, or wanted. Women also have a need to be needed, and so on and so forth. I'm sure there'll be some interesting comments with respect to that comment, but Rod says it so much more elegantly. And I think about this with respect to both ContraPoints. I was thinking, I haven't made a video about this because I just haven't made that many videos lately. But I was thinking about Homath and ContraPoints. I mean, Homath's video his videos just continue to come out about, in a sense, well, you complaining women, it's all your fault. You messed up the traditional system of how men and women can find romance. So now everything's broken because of you. And okay, but men do love challenges of fixing things. They do love to be the hero and play the hero and get to walk in and rise to the challenge and win the girl. And of course, Dune and Star Wars both have that Joseph Campbell hero's journey, metamyth, the entire thing. But then why are, again, A New Hope, the first Star Wars movie that came out, and the first book, Dune, that came out, they're sort of the quintessential hero's myth. But then they have difficulty with the world. Of course, Tolkien takes a much more Christian approach in terms of the big arc of the world. You have heroes within the story. Of course, you have Gandalf and Aragorn and Frodo. And you have other minor heroes and subplots going through Tolkien. But for Tolkien, the world is the story. And for Herbert, the world is a fixed set of ecologies that there might be some interesting stories within them, but finally the world has no story. And it strikes me that so often I think about Glory Days, the song, the song Glory Days, about the guy who peaks in high school. He's had his hero's journey and he's done it 19. And so for the rest of his life, he's working a crap job, probably married his high school sweetheart that maybe he divorced her or maybe he's sticking with it. And, but the best of his life was at 19. And now he just sits around talking about glory days. So, yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing the sequel, Dune 2, the conclusion of the Dune story. I had very much enjoyed the first movie. Although, again, reading the book and watching the movie, I had also a lot of thoughts about movie adaptations and why they're so difficult, especially with respect to the Bible. I know a number of you wrote me and said, "Oh, give The Chosen a chance." It's like, I just have a difficult time seeing any Christian movie adaptation. And sorry, it's just me. I don't mean anything against The Chosen. If you enjoy it, God bless you. But but this movie adaptation is good, but I don't have the same kind of, I have fascination with respect to movies, but and book adaptations, but not the same kind of ownership, I think, for obvious reasons. So yeah, I'll be interested, of course. Grim Grizz brings up the Sardaukar. So Dune is in the air, and I'll be curious to hear what many of you have to say. So leave a comment.